Hearing to order. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. Senator Cassidy will be sitting in the ranking member's chair until Senator Moran comes, and he'll be showing up soon. Look, accountability and transparency must be cornerstones of fulfilling VA's mission to provide high-quality care and benefits to our veterans. And we all agree that bad actors at the VA cannot and will not be tolerated. And that is why I worked with then Chairman Isaacson and bipartisan members of both chambers to pass the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act of 2017. Now, that law sought to increase whistleblower protections at the VA, including an Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. It also provided the VA with additional authorities it requested to remove employees for misconduct or poor performance. More than 5 years later, we know that parts of the law have worked, while others have faced significant challenges. The fact is, even one case of fraud, malicious patient harm, or abuse of power at the VA is one too many. And the biggest threat to bad actors is an informed and empowered workforce that knows its rights and the consequences of misconduct. According to VA's 2023 All-Employee Survey, 1 in 4 employees do not feel comfortable disclosing a suspected violation of law, rule, or regulation without a fear of reprisal. The VA needs to encourage reporting of wrongdoings by providing clear information about where to voice concerns, while also strengthening protections for whistleblowers. And it needs timely, thorough disciplinary procedures that follow due process that hold up in court. That is why I introduced the LEAD Act, and I want to thank Senators Moran and Rounds for joining me in that effort. The LEAD Act builds on our work of 2017 by providing solutions to the evolving challenges at VA to sustain individual and department-wide accountability and transparency. These challenges have been identified and confirmed by years of committee oversight and reports of independent oversight bodies like the VA OIG and the GAO. This bill recognizes that proactive VA oversight of its programs and having more engagement from leadership prevents harm from happening in the first place. This bill will help the VA hold bad actors accountable by giving employees the knowledge and the processes to take disciplinary action against bad actors that will stick. When it comes down to it, VA cannot repeat past mistakes when providing veterans with the care and the benefits they've earned or cut corners when trying to discipline employees. We must move forward with straightforward bipartisan reforms that will ensure past mistakes simply do not happen again. And with that, it is a pleasure for me to turn to my substitute ranking member, Senator Cassidy.
And for the record, I walked in at 3:28 and you'd already started the meeting. So,
well, they say if you aren't early, you're late, right?
The Vince Lombardi School. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing is about prioritizing the best interests of veterans over a disorganized and cumbersome bureaucracy, where all too often the interests of those it was created to serve appear to be an afterthought. I served on this committee since I first arrived in the Senate. It's clear to all serving here, Democrats, Republicans, and I will say to the people here to testify from the VA, that supporting veterans is our highest priority. But we can't sit on our hands and not acknowledge that at times the VA has refused to take appropriate action to correct things that have gone wrong. And despite the many good things the VA does every day for veterans, things still go wrong regularly. Now, some of these are just, you got a big organization, it's going to happen. But some, like barriers to health care, lengthy delays for disability compensation, missing student housing checks, laws and regulations not being followed, and even outright fraud and wrongdoing. That's why we can't take our eyes off the ball when it comes to changing the VA for the better. Kind of like total quality management. One policy, one medical center, one regional office, one cemetery at a time. And real change requires real accountability. In 2017, Congress passed the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act, giving VA the ability to hold bad employees more accountable. This included a new Section 714 authority, allowing for expedited removal, demotion, suspension of employees for poor performance or misconduct. This bipartisan bill, sponsored by Senator Rubio and Chairman Tester, helped improve both employee satisfaction and trust of veterans in the VA. By the way, important to note that VA employees liked accountability. They know that they're working hard, and there's occasional bad actor, apple or actor, and that bad actor apple, it reflects upon them all. So it improved employee satisfaction to have bad employees held accountable. Unfortunately, in recent years, actions by the courts, the FLRA, and the MSPB, as well as internal decisions by the VA, have cut back the law's most important provisions. In particular, arbitration actions between the VA and employee unions have caused the VA to cease use of Section 714 authority entirely. Because of this, a large number of fired employees have been reinstated with back pay, including some fired for, quote, grievous misconduct. I look forward to hearing more from our esteemed witnesses today on this issue. A few weeks ago at a hearing on veterans' mental health and suicide prevention, we were informed of a recent VA OIG report describing serious problems with the Veterans Crisis Line. According to the OIG, Veterans Crisis Line staff failed to take appropriate action with a veteran who died by suicide on the same night he contacted the VCL. VCL leadership interfered with the OIG investigation, and in the end, the staffer in question is still employed by the VA, while his superiors were moved to a different facility and promoted into a senior advisor role to the VHA undersecretary. I asked tough questions that day to the witnesses and received no real answers, like, for example, why weren't they fired? Maybe today we'll have an opportunity to learn why appropriate action was not taken and how we can ensure that VA staff are held accountable as they care for our nation's most important resource, our veterans. When VA employees cannot or will not do the jobs assigned, they should not continue working at the VA. Yet, at least in some areas, that is exactly what seems to be going on. That's wrong for veterans, their families, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking VA employees who do it right, and for taxpayers. When Congress first provided VA with an expedited authority to hold employees accountable, President Obama said, if you engage in an unethical practice, if you cover up a serious problem, you should be fired, period. It shouldn't be that difficult, close quote. That was true then, it's true today. I yield.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy, for that statement. I want to welcome Tracy Therrett, VA's Chief Human Capital Officer, back to the committee. Ms. Therrett is joined by folks covering other offices related to the conversation on accountability and transparency. Those folks include David Perry from VHA's Workforce Management Office. Good to have you here, David. Aaron Robinson from the Office of General Counsel. Aaron, thank you. And Ted Radway from the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. Thank you for being here, Ted. It's my understanding that Ms. Therrett will give the testimony and will be supported by these three gentlemen. I would ask that, please know that your full written testimony will be a part of the record. And you have the floor for the next 5 minutes. Tracy.
Good afternoon, Chairman Tester, Senator Cassidy, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss VA's ongoing efforts to provide world-class care and benefits to every veteran who entrusts us with those needs, be that health care, benefits, or end-of-life arrangements. I am accompanied today by David Perry, Chief Officer, Workforce Management Consulting, Veterans Health Administration, Ted Radway, Executive Director, Investigations and Acting Executive Director, Compliance and Oversight, Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection, and Aaron Robeson, Senior Attorney Advisor, Accountability, Office of General Counsel. We look forward to discussing what VA is doing to enhance employee and organizational accountability across the department, maintain strong labor management partnerships, and ensure appropriate oversight of our resources. We at the VA are laser focused on hiring and retaining a workforce that provides timely access to care and benefits. To that end, we thank Congress for providing the critical authorities and appropriations in bills such as the Reforming American Immigration and for Strong Employment Act, the PACT Act, and the 2023 Consolidated Appropriations Act. We appreciate the intent of the VA Clinician Appreciation, Recruitment, Education, Expansion, and Retention Support Careers Act of 2023, and support many of the provisions in this bill as it aligns with several legislative proposals offered as part of VA's fiscal year 2024 budget submission. My written statement provides more detailed information on the two bills central to this hearing, but I would like to take a few moments to offer a general overview of the Department's position on each bill. First, VA agrees with the underlying premise of S 2795, the Leadership, Engagement, Accountability, and Development Act of 2023, LEAD Act, though we propose amendments to various provisions in the bill. The LEAD Act nests well with VA's existing policies and procedures for responding to potential acts of misconduct and poor performance, to include training and standards of accountability. VA supports the establishment of an Office of Transparency, Engagement, Accountability, and Management, referred to as the TEAM Office in the Veterans Health Administration, a provision that aligns with VA's optimization plan on which we recently briefed this committee. VA also supports aligning the Office of the Medical Inspector under the TEAM's office, with minor technical amendments to ensure role clarity due to the critical oversight function this office provides. VA does not support Section 301, which would establish an Office of General Counsel within OAWP. OAWP's independence is crucial to avoiding a conflict of interest or the appearance of one in VA investigations. To facilitate independence, OAWP created the Investigative Attorneys Division, IAD, in 2022, a division of skilled attorneys who specialize in whistleblower and federal personnel law. IAD reports to the OAWP's Assistant Secretary through the Executive Director for Investigations, and its attorneys are independent of VA's Office of General Counsel. Second, VA does not support S 2158, the Restore Accountability Act of 2023, even without using 714 against American Federation of Government Employees Bargaining Unit employees since 2021, VA has taken over 4,000 adverse actions in each of the last 2 fiscal years using existing authorities. VA is concerned that as written, the Restore Accountability Act will continue to be the subject of extensive litigation and constitutional challenges, and we strongly caution against enacting requirements that could create unintended outcomes in the future. VA appreciates the committee's willingness to engage on these bills, and we welcome the opportunity to collaborate on how we can deliver care and services to our nation's veterans and their families. We thank the committee for this opportunity. This concludes my statement, and we welcome your questions.
The 2017 accountability law, which included new authorities it requested to better hold its employees accountable. Tracy, can you tell me what's changed and why the VA now concludes it doesn't need additional authorities to discipline mid-lower level employees from those outlined in Title V?
So, Senator, within the last 6 years, we have seen the challenges that implementing 714 faces. In the entire bill, we are using the provisions that deal with 713, which allows us to take actions against senior executives, and we are also implementing the provisions of the bill that allow us to recoup bonuses and awards, as well as relocation expenses and reduce annuities. So there are many provisions of the 2017 Accountability Act that we are using, and the fact that we have the OAWP established as a venue for employees to air their concerns and grievances and have those investigated. I think what we have seen with the legal challenges in the courts, as well as with the labor partners, is an opportunity to strengthen our processes and procedures, not just on the back end when it comes to proposing and deciding an action, but the need for that increased consistency and improvement in our policies and procedures, as well as our reporting and collecting of data on the front end. And that's why the LEAD Act fits so much better into what we need to do to make our the department more accountable in the future. So I think what we have seen is where we need to strengthen our employee relations procedures so that we can hold employees accountable, and that is on the execution of our authorities as opposed to additional authorities.
Mr. Robinson, can you talk about the department's position on what would happen if Congress gave you broader disciplinary authorities with lower evidence standards and fewer due process protections?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. You know, it obviously, the details of what types of due process protections are being lowered and what other changes are being proposed matter in that type of conversation. But generally, you know, what we will see if, you know, additional authorities that do those things are provided, you know, we will, as Ms. Therrett mentioned, we will see legal challenges, and we will go through that litigation process with really no guarantee of the VA will prevail in those legal challenges. You know, we have spent the last 6 years in administrative and judicial courts talking about these burden of proof and due process issues. And, you know, if we're talking more specifically about provisions such as those in the Restore Accountability Act, you know, we do have, the department has legal concerns, significant legal concerns about how those would play out in court. And I would also like to emphasize what Tracy had mentioned, which is, you know, accountability starts long before we get to the point where we're proposing actions. And so what we like about the LEAD Act is being able to focus our attention on that front end process where we're focusing on trying to make investigations more efficient, more thorough, and devoting our resources to that.
After the 2017 law was passed, VA took several steps during implementation, and those steps landed them in court. Mr. Robinson, why did the VA end up winning most of those cases, or did the VA end up winning most of those cases?
So with respect to implementation, there's kind of two lines of cases that we talk about. And the first line of cases is in the labor arena, where we implemented the decision was made in 2017 to implement and start using the authority without bargaining prior to implementation with the union. A grievance was filed at that time, and from there it culminated in the AFGE settlement agreement that we've discussed. And in between then, there was a lot of litigation between those 2 points and a lot of events that occurred during that time. And then the second line of cases really had to do not so much with implementation, but had to do with interpretation of the statute. So really, when we're talking about just implementation that occurred in 2017, we're talking about those labor cases.
And those court decisions ended up in a situation where a number of employees had to be reinstated. Is that correct?
Well, there were certain, you know, when we're talking about the labor cases, there was, you know, one case related to performance-based actions in which performance-based actions were overturned and folks were reinstated. As far as the other labor case that resulted in the AFGE settlement agreement, a smaller number than the pool of individuals impacted by that decision will be reinstated, and you know, there's a whole process that is going to have to play out in facilitating that settlement agreement.
Senator Cassidy.
I'll yield to Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Chairman Tester and ranking member. You know, I'm from Alabama. We're very proud of the VAs that we have in our state. And we've recently had a new one put in. It's a clinic. Very, very proud of that. I've got some friends that have some relatives in there, and they're doing a great job. And I think it's our sacred duty to take care of our veterans. I believe most people at the VA try to do that every day. I know since I've been on this committee for 3 years, we've worked awfully hard to make our VA better. But the fact is that we've had some abuses going on for a long time, and we all know that. I mean, it happens in every hospital, but we've had some happen in the VA, and we're responsible for that. And we knew that during the Obama years. We had veterans dying on waiting lists. VA's employees lied to cover it up. It was horrible. I mean, I read some of the statements, and I mean, you just can't fathom that. It's an insult to everybody that wears a uniform to have to go in some of these places. So these people needed to be held accountable. Frankly, a lot of them should have gone to jail for what I saw. When President Trump took office, he addressed this problem head on. A bipartisan Congress passed the VA Accountability Act. It passed by voice vote in the Senate, overwhelming in the House. It allowed the VA to fire 4,000 employees. Now, I wasn't here when that happened, but that's just amazing to me. 4,000 people were fired basically for not doing their job at the end of the day. And they were fired for cause. Now, these weren't layoffs. These were people that just absolutely either did a terrible job, didn't care about what they were doing, and they got laid off. And this is exactly what a bipartisan Congress intended to do, is get this straight. These people have no business getting a paycheck from the taxpayers. It's absolutely, it's criminal. The law is still on the books, but for some reason, we've reached a settlement. Somebody's reached a settlement with trial lawyers, and we're not enforcing this anymore. The law is still on the books. This is not how the Constitution works last time I looked. You know, we pass a law, we're supposed to go by the law. I mean, this has been in the playbook for a long time on the left to try to make this work like this, and we can't do it. I mean, we keep trying to make the VA better, and we're making it worse. I mean, we're not making any progress here. We saw under President Obama that things would change. We thought they would change. It didn't change. Arguably, it got much worse. So now we've agreed to give free money to people that didn't do their job. It's mind-boggling to me. I mean, we take one step forward and two steps back. This can't be how the system works. I mean, that's not the reason I ran for this job, and hopefully the reason that you're not doing your job. Veterans need help, and it's obviously, we all know it's the biggest healthcare system in the world. The VA is the biggest healthcare system, and it's hard. Understandably, it's hard. But now, in my state of Alabama, we have 74 people who were fired for cause, not laid off, and now they're getting their jobs back. And I've heard some horror stories about what some of them did. And it's embarrassing to me now to talk to veterans about the situation that we got ourselves in, try to get ourselves out, now we're back in it. So it's no secret that it's getting worse. And we can't continue to do this. I don't care, you know, what we got to do, we got to make it better, but when we make a law, we got to go by, and we got to make it work. So, Ms. Therrick, I want to believe that the VA is hiring only the best and the brightest employees, and we all want that. Sometimes you don't know what you're getting to serve our veterans. But as many of us have discussed since I've been here for 3 years, we know not everybody in the VA is going to be exactly what we want. So how does the VA plan to protect its veteran patients from this grievous misconduct if we're not going to go by this Accountability Act? How are we going to do that?
So, Senator Tuberville, I acknowledge that we want the best working at the VA, and we want to protect the rights of veterans. And we do have authorities that allow us to take adverse actions. I mentioned in my opening statement that since 2021, we have not been using 714 for American Federation of Government Employees because we were found to have not bargained impact and implementation with them. We have used our existing authorities for performance and conduct actions under Chapter 43 and Chapter 75, and we continue to take over 4,000 adverse actions, which are removals, demotions, suspensions of more than 14 days. So we have found the opportunity to use the existing authorities that we have to hold employees accountable. I do acknowledge, and I don't want any views on these bills to indicate that we are happy with the status quo or we don't see opportunity to improve and do better. We know there's still inconsistency in how actions are executed in the field. We know that things still take too long, and that's why we want to work with this committee on something like the LEAD Act, where we can look at those policies and procedures that we take prior to proposing an action to make sure that we have evidence, as the chairman had mentioned, that is thorough, that is timely and affords employees due process. So at the end of the day, we are able to remove those employees who should not be working for the VA. We also just completed a record year of hiring, and we are learning from the authorities that we received in the PACT Act how to hire more effectively and efficiently. So with that, we're looking at making sure that we have employees who are committed to those who have worn the uniform, and that we are able to remove those with performance and conduct issues at the earliest point we see those issues.
These 4,000, will we have any special oversight? You know, they did something wrong at the beginning. Now, you know what I'm saying. I mean, somebody's got to be held accountable, because if this happens again, we have people lose their lives. My goodness.
No, absolutely agree, Senator Tuberville. And what I would say in the settlement that we reached with the American Federation of Government Employees that impacts about 4,000 employees, we do have a provision in that settlement agreement that allows us to repropose the action which the FLRA determined was not taken lawfully because we didn't engage in impact and implementation bargaining. So even though that action taken under 714 we could not sustain, we can look at actions and retake them under 43 and 75 and continue to make sure that individuals who should not be working in our medical centers are removed for the reasons that they shouldn't be working there.
Well, hopefully they start with 2 strikes, you know, and not get 3 strikes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Chairman Tester and Ranking Member or Acting Ranking Member Cassidy, and thanks to our witnesses for being here today. This is a really important topic of accountability and transparency at the VA, and I look forward to discussing it with you. Ms. Thurrott, we've been discussing the importance of transparency and accountability, and the VA Office of the Inspector General is an important partner in this work. Senator Bozeman and I joined together to introduce the VA OIG Training Act, which would require new VA employees to be trained about the role of the Inspector General, the resources that the office provides, and its mission to root out waste, fraud, abuse, and misconduct of the VA. The Senate passed our bill this summer. We're hoping to see it pass the House as well. In order to improve oversight and accountability, why is it important that employees understand the role of the Inspector General?
So, Senator Hassan, I support the legislation that you have put forth, and we are ready to implement it if enacted. The organization that I lead is responsible for our talent management system, so any courses that we would require of our workforce would be tracked and monitored in that system. But as the chairman had mentioned, our latest all-employee survey shows that only 25% of our workforce feels comfortable reporting issues and not being retaliated against for that. Course training like what you're proposing would help to increase the confidence that our employees can raise issues at the earliest point possible and bring them to the attention of either the Inspector General or the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. I know my colleague, Mr. Radway, has seen tremendous improvement in OAWP's ability to get employees to come to them with issues, to investigate those issues, and hold individuals accountable when they're found to have engaged in wrongdoing.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm just going to kind of follow up this conversation and happy to take comments because obviously the women and men who work at the VA are our most critical assets in delivering care and benefits to veterans, and they're also best positioned within the department to see when something or someone isn't meeting the standards that the department sets to ensure excellent service to our veterans. So sometimes employees who notice something is wrong, as you're pointing out and as we're all talking about, may not know the right way to bring up their concerns. So training is one thing we just talked about, but how can the VA foster a culture of transparency and provide employees with that information on where they go to report wrongdoing?
I will start and then pass the question to Mr. Radway. There is a provision in the LEAD Act that talks about us increasing the surveys and the training that we do. I think getting the information out in multiple forums, whether it is in that all-employee survey that 75% of our workforce recently took, making sure that they know where they can go, and if there are concerns that they have about going to those resources that are available, that we're able to address those in real time. I'll ask Mr. Radway if he has any other additional thoughts on that question.
Thank you.
Just on training, we've, in the past year, trained over 405,000 VA employees on whistleblower rights and protections, over 40,000 supervisors we've trained, and that's through our TMS video system, trained over 13,000 supervisors live. OAWP has been reaching out and doing live training. We've also been meeting with Vision Leadership on a one-on-one basis and advising them about what our office does, the opportunities, and we've also established a whistleblower navigator position that helps whistleblowers navigate through the process and understand their rights and abilities.
Thank you. And that brings me really to my last question. Once an employee has lodged a complaint as a whistleblower, he or she is obviously entitled to certain rights and protections. But VA employees have shared with my office that once their complaint is filed, they never hear anything further about the status of the case. For example, whether it was investigated, whether any action was taken. Now, we understand that there's certain sensitive information that can't be shared because of privacy concerns, but how can we better communicate with whistleblowers to ensure that they know that their concerns have been considered and that they can be part of the solution towards improving accountability at the VA?
So, Senator, we've recently modified our procedures in OAWP, and complainants will be notified approximately every 2 weeks, given an update on the status of their complaint.
All right, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Senator Cassidy.
Mr. Redway, I understand that you are responsible for investigating VA leadership. Again, I mentioned earlier my concerns regarding the Veterans Crisis Hotline. The VA Inspector General uncovered systemic issues at the VCL, and that the VCL director for quality and training provided advice and incorrect information to witnesses, potentially compromising the accuracy and integrity of the IG investigation. The executive director called off a necessary root cause analysis following a patient's suicide, stating, quote, "There is insufficient information for us to really move forward." The root cause analysis only initiated after the VA received notice of an IG investigation. And I also am told that this person remains in a leadership position at the Veterans Crisis Hotline, and that the Veterans Crisis Executive Director was promoted to a senior executive role at VA headquarters, now serving as a senior advisor in the Secretary's office. Whoa. Are you aware of the IG report? And how is this explain this in a way which makes us feel better about the process taking place?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'm not aware of whether OAWP has a specific investigation in that matter, but I believe Mr. Perry can provide some additional illumination on your question.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy, for that question. To your point, we do have the findings of the OIG report that came back early last month, so we are in the process of reviewing the recommendations and findings of that report. The actual event itself, as tragic as it is, as we all know, there were some opportunities for us to look at the process and procedures that were in place, and some changes have been made already to account for those changes that needed to be taken. And so retraining occurred for those crisis responders, and then also looking at the process of who can fill in when those positions need to be staffed adequately. And so those changes have already occurred in the actual procedures itself. The supervisor you mentioned is still in staff, but they are not in a direct veteran crisis responder role.
But that is beside the point as regards the supervisor's role. The question is, if they interfere with an investigation, as is alleged, they shouldn't be in any role. Why would you have any faith in the integrity of what they did when apparently what they have already done was to interfere with an investigation and to tamper with an investigation?
Yes, sir, and we agree with you, and so that is what we're currently reviewing, are those findings.
You said that you received this report early last month.
About 3, maybe 4 weeks ago at most.
So alacrity comes to mind, or the lack thereof. I mean, you've had 4 weeks to investigate something which is fairly significant. This isn't a traffic ticket. This is something which may have did result in somebody's death, and which interfere with an investigation. So we're about accountability. When will you be complete? If not, 4 weeks is not enough.
4 weeks was just from the time we received the OIG report. It is actively being reviewed now.
And so when will your active review be through?
I can't give you a timeline.
I got to tell you, 4 weeks seems plenty enough time to investigate.
Agree, sir. It is on the top of our priority list to make sure.
If it's on the top of your priority list and it's 4 weeks and it still hasn't been done, it suggests to me that your priorities, again, lack alacrity, urgency, a reason to get on top of it right away. and I don't think I'm being hard here. If there's a problem in my house, I don't wait 4 weeks to fix it. This person has been elevated as a senior elevated after this was alleged. So again, tell us in the Committee of Oversight why we should have confidence in your processes.
Sir, the report that we received from the OIG is not a full investigative file, and so we are working through that process now to look at all the underlying evidence, and recommendations and corrective actions will be taken upon that review.
So, Mr. Perry, briefly, how are employees rated? I've been told by people in the VA workforce that it really depends on who you know. So what is the qualitative measures used to rate somebody?
So we put the performance measures in everyone's standards performance plans, and they're measured accordingly based on their performance. And so that is consistently across by occupation.
And who judges their performance?
Their first level supervisor,
So,
and that's
directly
reviewed by their
above.
second level.
And do you have any sense of this person who's in question, what their evaluations have shown in the past?
Sir, I'm not I don't have access to their actual performance information, but that will be something that does get taken under review.
Okay, I yield.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I have two letters, one from 12 labor unions, including the AFL, AFG, SEIU, and NNU, and one from the Fraternal Order of Police I'd like to enter into the record, raising concerns about provisions in the Restore VA Accountability Act that would undermine workers and undermine patient safety. I'd ask unanimous.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These letters share my concerns over a section of this bill that would override current collective bargaining agreements. It's always open season in this committee, attacking federal labor unions or attacking labor unions anywhere, maybe. These collective bargaining agreements are that. They're an agreement. They're a contract between labor and management that come from hard-fought negotiations. Throwing collective bargaining agreements to the side when one party doesn't like it undermines the bargaining process for the hardworking, dedicated VA employees who serve our veterans every day. We owe it, and many of whom are veterans themselves, of course. We owe it to the Americans who work in their VAs and care for our veterans to respect the collective bargaining agreements that have been obviously agreed to by both sides. Question for Ms. Theriot. We want employees to come forward and tell section chiefs what's going right and what's going wrong at our facilities. Ohio has large facilities at Dayton, Chillicothe, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and big regional that are not quite VA facilities, and 28, 29, 30 CBOCs. We don't want employees afraid to raise concerns because of supervisor retaliation or because they don't think anything will change if they do report it. In your judgment, will the LEAD Act improve the VA's process to hold individuals responsible for egregious actions like fraud and patient safety or retaliatory actions against whistleblowers?
Senator Brown, I do. The LEAD Act gives us great opportunity to improve our processes, our procedures, our data collection, provide you with information for recurring reporting processes, improve our surveys, improve our training, and do some restructuring within the Veterans Health Administration to strengthen the oversight of our field.
Okay. Other comments? Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. Ms. Theriot, I think in your testimony you made a reference to quoting someone else saying we're hiring and retaining the best, most talented and dedicated employees in healthcare. Now, I've recently learned that there have been at least 15 individuals that were let go due to grievous misconduct that's defined elsewhere, and I'll expand the definition. Yet under the direction of the central office and the settlement agreement, the VISNs will have to offer these 15 people who were judged to have been guilty of grievous misconduct to offer them reinstatement. So my understanding of grievous is defined as misconduct related to patient abuse, reckless or intentional disregard for patient welfare, racial harassment, sexual harassment, impairment while on duty, violent threats, reckless or intentional endangerment of others, and or criminal activity. So explain to me how someone who may have been separated due to grievous misconduct has to be offered an opportunity to come back to work at the business.
Senator Tellis, no one from my office was involved in the negotiations of that settlement. The Veterans Health Administration and the Office of General Counsel participated in those negotiations. So I'm going to ask Mr. Perry to speak to the process for identifying grievous misconduct cases.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. To your point, we did look at those cases, and so when we received the court ruling, we had to canvass all of our field sites to understand what their population of these cases that met the criteria of grievous misconduct. In that review, if we had questions, we worked collaboratively back with those offices to make sure that we had complete case files and could support the justification for the adverse action that was taken. In that review, there was a lot of back and forth to make sure that we got it right, and those cases did go up, and that was part of the final settlement agreement. Ultimately, anyone that does elect to come back and be reinstatement, we did have that carve out, as Mr. Robinson mentioned, that allows us to propose subsequent action upon their return under one of our other authorities.
Subsequent disciplinary action? Or
Based on the
separation?
original actions, yes, sir. We can repropose those actions under 75 or 43.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
If I
Go ahead,
may,
Ms. Robinson.
I'd just like to make one point. If an individual under the settlement agreement is deemed to, or qualifies under the grievous category, grievous misconduct category, they do not get reinstated.
Okay. You all are aware of the, I'm going to make sure I get the terminology right, the critical skills incentive. I know that's under investigation right now. I'm not going to dig too deep, except to say, let's assume that somebody thought that the population that got the bonuses, the executives, should have been subject to some sort of process. So I don't want to talk about who got it. I want to talk about the methodology that was used that would have provided a rational basis that these certain skill categories fit congressional intent. Can I at least get an answer on that?
Yep, absolutely, Senator Tillis. So first, we are very grateful for the authorities in the PACT Act. It helped us to hire at record levels in both VHA and VBA this past year, grow the workforce by a percentage we haven't seen in the last 15 years. With the critical skills incentives, what I can offer is the purpose of that incentive is to close mission critical skills gaps or to promote reskilling of employees. And in our policy, we have two categories by which someone can be eligible for a critical skills incentive. Either they have a shortage skill, which is on an approved list. That means either our human capital operating plan includes that shortage skill, or it's in one of the OIG shortage lists or VHA shortage occupation lists. 96% of the critical skills incentives that we have approved to date fall within that category of a shortage skill on one of those approved lists.
And would these executive positions have fit into that list?
They did not, sir. Okay. So there's a second category called high demand skills, which you need a market factors justification to support. Once these were processed and they were raised with our secretary as having been approved, we looked back and we did not see that the precision that was needed to identify the individuals that were recommended for the CSI as having a high demand skill that was supported by market factors, and the group incentives are to be very narrowly defined. This was way too broad with too many occupational series, too many varied occupations. So since that occurred, the Office of Inspector General is doing a review so they can help us strengthen our policies and procedures, add more internal controls to the use, and the Secretary has raised the delegation of authority for CSIs to senior executives to his level so that any recommendations in the future have to be approved by him.
Okay.
We have also, I'm sorry, one more thing. We have also canceled all of the CSIs that were processed for our VHA and VBA central office executives are establishing debts and collecting those monies that were paid.
Okay, so did I hear you say clawback?
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Senator King.
Senator Manchin. He has a deadline. Not
That's,
something I
that's,
do every day,
that's no excuse. Senator Manchin.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Let me just say, first of all, most everybody in West Virginia, and we have a lot of veterans, they all want to go to the veteran clinics or the veteran hospitals to get their care. They say they're better understood, they feel much more comfortable, and they feel that their care is just as good, if not better. The problem we're having in West Virginia, these comes from my field workers, they're getting cancellations unbelievable because of lack of personnel. I don't know if you all been getting that up at your level, and Ms. Terrett and Mr. Perry, but the medical staff and doctors, the staff, the primary care and specialty, they're just not there. and the wait lines are so long, so they have to go out into the community and get community care because they can't get their veterans care. So I don't know what you all can do about that. If you can get back to me and let me know how we can help or do anything to recruit into those. We have 4 hospitals in West Virginia. How many CBOCs we have? CBOCs, how many clinics? Okay. You know, we have some CBOCs also, but we have 4 major hospitals. And we're running that. This is our highest request when they come. So are you getting this around the country or in rural areas?
Senator Mansfield, thank you for that question. Yes, we do have historic challenges in some of the rural areas with hiring and recruiting. I think thanks to the PACT Act that we received last year, we are making some progress in those areas. To your point, where we're not able to see a veteran in-house for primary care or specialty care, we do refer out to the community to make sure that we're not making the veteran wait longer than they have to.
I don't want to lose our veterans to, if we do, I guarantee you might not come back. So
Yes,
they
sir.
don't want to go.
Yes,
They
sir.
want to stay with us,
Yes.
with the VA.
Yes, so we are working aggressively. I will tell you that what we're focused on now in VHA is looking at our upcoming access sprints to look at where we can
We
actually
give you
improve access.
The most egregious where we have in our 4 hospitals that we have in state, I'll get our staff to get back with you and tell you the ones where we're really having shortages and long lines, long wait times. The other one is the compensation and pension exams. That is our most requested thing, and they're having a tremendous backlog on these. I mean, it's probably part of the same problem, but this compensation and pension exams is something that it seems like almost every veteran is asking for to see if they can get a little bit more financial help. And are you finding these to be, what I would like to know is what's the rejection rate of people claiming they have a medical problem that was caused by their military service, and you all find out it's not really caused by the military service?
Yes, sir. I don't have that data. That is on our veterans benefits side. We're certainly happy to bring that
Another thing
back.
that you should check on, that I could ask for you, any of you to check on this. I've been told that basically we have a higher percentage of new recruits coming into the service in all branches, that within the first year they're claiming disability. And they're having a hard time justifying, whether they weren't examined properly before they came in, but then the federal government and the veterans end up with that responsibility. And we want to make sure that we're able to take care of those who truly have military-related illnesses and dependencies and different medical services, rather than those that are coming in with one and then claiming it once they get in. Does that make sense? Do you see a high percentage? Do you all see?
So tracking exactly what you're saying, Senator Manchin, so looking at the recruitment, looking at the CMP exams, looking at the recruits identifying as having a disability, we are publishing, related to the PACT Act, a monthly dashboard that looks at all of that information. I think a lot of the data that we're seeing is supporting the information that you're providing to us as well, and we're happy to work with your staff on those issues.
Okay. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Senator Bozeman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for having this hearing, and thank you all for being here and the good work that you do. Accountability and transparency at the VA are imperative in ensuring quality care within the organization, and we look forward to continuing our work on this committee to provide the VA with the tools it needs to deliver world-class care to veterans. And I apologize for not being earlier, but I'm ranking member on VA MilCon, and we're pleased to have the bill on the floor right now. We're discussing it, and hopefully early next week we'll get that passed and have some certainty on the Senate side, and then work with our colleagues on the House. The good news is there's tremendous support. We hear about all the rancor going on up here, but the nice thing about veterans, nobody cares if they're Democrats or Republicans. And this committee is a very, very bipartisan group that, with your all's help, has done a lot for veterans in the last several years. So leadership at the local medical center level is important, especially during times of operational changes to the organization. This importance has been highlighted during the deployment of the new electronic health record system. The DoD has been able to implement the same system in almost all of its facilities in the U.S. However, the VA is not yet fully to implement this system even in one facility. It's my belief that leadership at the local level is critical to the success of the implementation of the EHRM. And I know that we've all been frustrated with that. You all been frustrated with it and working really hard to get it going. Ms. Therrett, is the VA exploring options to put systems or processes in place to hold medical directors accountable if you encounter resistance in implementing EHR at their facility when there are no technical issues with the system?
Senator, I'm going to ask Mr. Perry if he has information related to the question that you posed with respect to VHA.
You're like me.
Thank you, Senator.
Punch you and say, "Take it, David."
Yes, sir. I'm not aware of specifically any leadership that's pushing back on the electronic health record deployment. I know what I can say is that we heard loud and clear from our clinical community that there were some real challenges with the system, and we wanted to make sure that we got it right. So when we made that strategic pause in the deployment of Cerner, that is exactly why we did so. So we could go back to the vendor to make sure that the concerns that were addressed by our clinicians were addressed, so that when we did go forward with more deployments, we didn't actually cause any more harm. In the case where we had a leader decide not to implement EHR, we would take appropriate steps to make sure that it did not occur. But that was not the reasoning for delaying any of the deployments, sir.
Good. Very good. That's good to hear. I recently joined Senator Peters in introducing the VA Peer Review Neutrality Act. This legislation is important. It would require peer reviewers to withdraw from the case where they have direct involvement or a conflict of interest, and have a peer review committee at another VA facility evaluate the findings. So, Ms. Therrett or Mr. Perry, whoever's appropriate, can you speak to the importance of having impartiality and neutrality when conducting quality management and administrative investigations?
Absolutely, sir, and I think that's one of the main reasons we support the LEAD Act, is to make sure that when we have those concerns come up, that we have the appropriate oversight and reviews that happen from a point of neutrality. And so I think combining some of those focuses on the clinical and the administrative side, I think those outside neutral reviews are paramount to make sure that we get it right and that we don't have things continue to happen that lead to bad outcomes.
Very good. Did you take note of that, Mr. Chairman, that they support this and feel like we need to get it pushed forward?
It's your request, Senator Bozeman.
No, again, thank you all very much, and we do appreciate all of your hard work and look forward to continue to work with you in the future on all of these different things. And so again, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bozeman, I might add that the VA Milcon bill is on the floor to your good leadership. Senator King.
I don't know if that's true, but we'll take it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on a point that Senator Manchin made, because I think it was a really important one. We're turning away and losing veterans because of lack of staff. It's an enormous problem. I understand it's a problem throughout the society. Every business that I talk to is short of staff. But I want to talk about the staffing problem in the VA, and that's where you might be able to help us. There are two issues that I've identified. One is pay, and the other is red tape. Let's talk about pay for a minute. It's interesting. I'll submit for the record, Mr. Chairman, a chart from the VA on Vision 1 on time to fill. And it's interesting, what I'd like you to do is to do some additional research. But of the time to fill, the lowest are generally urban areas and the highest are rural areas. Now, this is a small sample, but I'd like you to do this analysis on a broader sample and see if I'm correct. But I believe that you'll find that rural areas are having a harder time. The time to fill in Maine is 2:51. In White River Junction, it's 2:61. In Providence, it's 1:27. And so I think that's where we get to the pay part. And one of the differential in pay between different areas of the country, I think, is obsolete, because people can work anywhere. You can now live in rural Maine and work remotely for the VA in Boston. Why would you go to work for the VA in Togus, Maine at a 15 or 20% pay cut if you can work remotely in Boston? Do you see what I mean? We're hurting the competitiveness of our rural VA facilities. So I think we should really have a rethinking of the pay differential, which is based on times you didn't have remote working, people weren't as mobile. This is national competition for professionals. Ms. Therrett, you've nodded a few times. What do you think?
So I think Mr. Perry and I may join forces on answering this question. I agree. I think the authorities that we have in the PACT Act have helped us to level some of those gaps or close some of those gaps that you've talked about between urban and rural, because we're able to offer more incentives to those rural facilities.
But I know that
there's
Togus is not competitive with Boston or New Bedford or Providence.
We still have a long way to go, and then working with organizations like the Federal Salary Council and the Federal Prevailing Rate Advisory Committee, that's where I'm trying to spearhead some of these efforts at a broader level. I know Mr. Perry's team is working on one deliverable that we still owe the committee from the PACT Act, which is the Rural Recruitment and Retention Plan, where we can put more effort into reducing the red tape that you're seeing with the time to
Well, I haven't
fill.
gotten to that yet.
Yeah.
But look at the pay issue. I mean, I believe that the whole idea of differential pay in different regions based on cost of living is somewhat obsolete. Because when you're competing for a healthcare professional, they have nationwide choices. And to have a significant disadvantage in pay, I don't think it's any coincidence that White River and Togus are the ones that are lagging here, because they both have really good management. I know the people at Togus, they're terrific. So it's not a management issue, it's that they've got to compete, and they have to compete with local hospitals. And that's a real problem. Let me talk about the red tape issue. Well, you know, here, again, let's go back to competition. To hire a professional at Togus or White River is around 250 days time to fill. At our Northern Light Healthcare facility, which is in the same region in northern and eastern Maine, it's 56 days. Maine Health, it's about 89 or 90 days, but significantly below. And yet that's who we're competing with. We have to really think hard about all the steps, and here's one of them. My understanding and my research tells me that there's something like 24 steps to hire somebody in the VA, and at Northern Light it's 7. We got to rethink that, it seems to me, and because again, we're in a competitive situation. The net result is less service to veterans. So how do we do that? I don't think Walmart has to go through some regional center when they want to hire somebody in Brunswick, Maine, or wherever they have a store. Why not empower the local managers? If they have a need, give them a budget, they decide what they need, who they need, and do the hiring and hold them accountable. But don't have 24 steps in the process. Thoughts? She's passing it to you.
Yeah, yes, sir. I agree with you. There is a lot of steps in the hiring process, and I think we have a concerted effort to make sure we can streamline those where we can. Some of those steps that you mentioned are required, and so when you
Required by whom?
Some of them are self-imposed. Some of them are from our Office of Personnel Management. We have requirements around credentialing and privileging, so we have to make sure.
But they work for you, or they work for Dennis. In other words, if they're required by us, let me know, because that's something we can fix.
Yes, absolutely.
If they're required within your system, that's what I want you to re-examine.
And those are the ones that we are streamlining, sir, to make sure that we reduce those redundant steps. But there are requirements that we have to apply because it is just the federal rules that we have to comply with. To your point about the time it takes, you're exactly right. I think it does happen not as quickly as we want. To make one point of clarification, the decision to hire is at the local level, and those budgets are managed at the facility level. So they have complete autonomy to decide when they want to hire and who they want to hire or for what types of positions.
But they still have to go through those 24 steps.
Yes, sir. The steps do apply. So that's where we're looking to gain efficiency as many as possible. But
Well,
yes.
I hope you can come back to this committee and show us some changes that will deal with this problem, because ultimately, I'm sorry, I know I'm over time, Mr. Chairman, but ultimately, this is all about service to veterans.
Yes, sir.
And you can have the best hospital in the world, but if they can't get an appointment because there's a lack of staff, then we're not meeting our commitment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, just to further add on, because I know Senators Blackburn, Moran, and Senator Blumenthal's already here. The end result of this is we can't compete with the private sector. They're beating us to the punch for good employees. When employees want to work for the VA, it just takes too long and people can't survive on their good looks. They've got to have a check coming in. That's exactly correct. And so it's important that if it's something that we need to do here, please let us know what that is. I got a notion King would probably write a bill up tomorrow, okay? And I also have a notion that Bozeman would probably co-sponsor it. So, you know, it's good. So what were you going to say?
During COVID, did you all have the ability to cut through some of that stuff?
So your question is appropriate because during COVID, what we did is we either deferred or delayed certain steps
Right.
in the process to get people on
So
board
we
in days.
have the ability to have essentially a study to look back and see if that caused problems. And to me, you know, if I don't think it did. And so, you know, it looks to me like you could come to us and say, you know, we did it this way, and then, you know, somehow us be helpful of saying, hey, this has worked in the past, you know, why aren't we doing it now, you know?
I would welcome those conversations because we did have a GAO report that identified some lack of compliance with then going back in and updating the system or following up on actions that were delayed or deferred. So on one hand, you want to respect the findings of the GAO study and say, well, maybe we shouldn't have done those things. But on the other hand, we, to your point, don't want to lose talent because we're taking 24 steps and it should be 7 steps. So trying to find that right balance.
Okay. So I was misinformed. People got waylaid on their way to the VA committee. So I want to thank you for being our witnesses today. We have more work to be done in this space. I look forward to productive discussions on this and other issues that have been brought up today so that we can move the VA forward. The record will be open for a week. This hearing is adjourned.